As this case progresses and progresses, I feel like every single time I make a video, I could be like, yep, told you so. Guys, I'm JP Gunner. This is Crime Time. Today, we're going to be discussing a couple of different issues as, apparently, Ethan's best friend is who found Ethan and Xana Kernodle. And we have a lawyer that's going to make $200 an hour, and it's driving the internet nuts because apparently you don't think lawyers should get paid for defending their clients. Go ahead and jump right into this. I'm JP Gunner. This is Crime Time. Let's do it.
Bring it back.
What's going on, everybody? As you guys know, I'm JP Gunner, and this is Crime Time with JP Gunner. Now, before we get started, I want to say first and foremost, thank you to everybody that supports this channel or any of my other channels, regardless of the method, whether it's Cash App, Patreon, PayPal. Truth is, guys, I couldn't do this each and every day as often as I do if it was not for you. I went through a little bit of a sickness. Now I'm back. I'm good. Everything is great. So I'm here to give you guys content. If you too find value in my content, feel free to hit those links down below. YouTube demonetizes the majority of my work or sometimes even takes me down. You guys are who makes this work. Thank you to the Gun Squad. Big shout out to Amy. Amy who hit the tip jar even when I wasn't working yesterday as I was a little under the weather. Thank you to Amy. With that being said, let's go ahead and get on to this. By the way, down below, you'll see my links to all my other YouTube channels, my other live stream channel, which it can get a little wild, my gaming channel, my news channel, things like that. If you guys want to see some of my other content, as long as you're not of the snowflake variety, because I don't like you pussies, feel free to hit those links and go check it out. All right, so we're going to get right into this. The whole fucking internet is going nuts about a couple different things. Number one, Ann Taylor. People act like Ann Taylor should just recuse herself and not even. Here's the thing. Even if Ann Taylor did, and there was a new lawyer that came in, you would just have a problem with that. Because in your head, you want Brian Kohlberger to be guilty. A lot of you people don't even care. You just want the case solved. You just want, and not even necessarily solved. You just want it to be over with. You don't care if Brian Kohlberger's innocent or guilty. The fact that someone is willing to take the case, make her money at her job, and give Brian Kohlberger potentially the fairest trial he could get, because we all know he's not getting one. For some reason, that bothers y'all. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with y'all. We either believe that people are innocent until they're proven guilty, or you don't. Then we're going to move on, and we'll talk a little bit about the fact that Ethan's best friend is the one who found Ethan's body and gave him, checked his pulse. Now, I got a question when it comes to this. Ethan's throat was slit. Why would you need to check the pulse of a dude that wouldn't blood be everywhere? This story gets weirder and weirder as we go. And to me, it continues to put real questions when it comes to Dylan. Guys, Idaho murder victims Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin were found by his best friend who checked for a pulse on their bodies and made 911 call from surviving roommate's phone, that's Dylan's phone, 8 hours after the attack. Where the fuck is Bethany in all of this? I'm going to go out on a limb again and say, I don't believe Bethany was there. I'm sorry. I'm starting to not even believe that Bethany was there. We'll get into all this, but here's the thing. As bloody as this crime scene would have had to have been, you have to ask yourself, did they not see that? Like, I know if I look down and I see, think about it, his throat was slit, is what they're saying. And here's what's really weird, because in the original affidavit, or was it the coroner's report, it was said that Kernodle, that Ethan was back in the room, and Kernodle, I think it was the affidavit that said Kernodle was in the hall. But then we've had so many switches of stories with this, it's incredible to me, right? So anyways, I just want to make this clear, and then here's what the strange thing. Remember they said that one, like Dylan or somebody had went outside and passed out and Bethany was hyperventilating and all of this? Like, I'm curious how much of these stories are actually true, not true, whatever the case may be. So remember, Dylan calls the friends, apparently even Ethan's best friend, but however, didn't call 911. Now we're finding out she didn't even call 911. She's not even the person that dialed 911. Remember they were trying to say she dialed 911 and then handed the phone to the friend because she was, hyperventilating or passing out or whatever. None of these stories are ending up accurate. Now, let's go ahead. And before you say anything, I've been covering this case since day one. All these little details a lot of you guys forget, I remember because I did videos on the fucking topics. But anyway, let's get to this. So, oddly, this person checked for a pulse. Xander Cornoto and Ethan Chapin were found dead by his best friend. The unidentified friend checked their pulses before calling 911. Now, I'm asking, does any of that make sense? Think about how bloody this crime scene would have had to have been. I'm not checking your pulse with your neck slit wide the fuck open, right? Police were called from surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen's phone. So we're finally starting to get that information, at least. At least we're getting that. Xander Cornoto and Ethan Chapin were found dead by his best friend, who checked for their pulse. I wonder if anybody even went up to the upstairs room. Like, I wonder if the first people to go, and this is what's concerning to me, okay? Because remember, a lot of us believe the knife sheath could have been planted, right? Like, you don't hear anything about Maddie and Kaylee's room. Like, who went up there? Was it the police? Did the other friends go up there? Did other people involved I'm very, very curious on this. We've all talked about the 8 hours. We've all talked about all of this. Okay? Just seems like a long time. Who checked for their pulse before calling 911 from a surviving roommate's cell phone 8 hours later. The unidentified friend had gone over to the Moscow, Idaho home on the morning of November 13th. Sources told, of course, it's always just some random source, told News Nation Chapin's best friend found the two bodies and took their pulse before shouting at roommate Dylan Mortensen and others to call 911. So let me get this straight. So where were they at? What do you mean shouting for them? So did this dude just go over there and go in the house and go check this shit out? Or did Dylan know? Like, do you see what's goofy here? He's like, oh, call 911. Like, why wouldn't that be? Do you see my point? Like I'm curious about all of this. I'm curious. So did she or did she not call over Ethan's best friend? The sources told Dylan Mortensen, so anyway, the call was made from Mortensen's phone, but new details revealed it was the best friend that talked to the police. Mortensen came face to face with Koberger, who they say was the one, shortly after the murders, as questions rise why she didn't call the 911 earlier, of course. Mortensen allegedly believed the sounds of the four of their housemates being brutally murdered were sounds from the college partiers in the house. But remember, she was frozen in fear. She reportedly called out to the friends and roommates during the early morning hours of November 13 to quiet down. Calm down, you're being loud, she reportedly yelled around 4 a.m., in addition to, I'm trying to sleep. The college student then closed and locked the door, according to one report in the New York Post. After hearing some more loud noises that night, Mortensen opened her door again and saw accused murderer Koberger, who believed him to be a partygoer. Believed he fit in there. In fact, I've heard other stories that they believed he was one of Ethan's friends. That's an interesting twist, don't you think? Let's continue. The alleged claims answer questions from Chapin's sister-in-law that questioned why Mortensen, who was on the property along with Bethany Funk, they claim, didn't call the police after seeing the suspect leave the house. Sister-in-law revealed that Mortensen called all the roommates after she heard screaming and crying coming from the rooms. Called them all and then went to sleep, apparently. And then, the next day called Ethan's best friend or whatever, and then they're checking pulses on people that would have had to have been bleeding profusely? This doesn't make sense. None of this whole shit makes sense to me. And you know this. You know this. None of this shit makes sense to you either. And let's go ahead and take a look. So this was the sister-in-law. X and E were in a room. 911 caller was the friend who went in because D called him to come over because she was scared from what she heard in the night. He went to X and E's room first, then called 911. So remember, before this information came out, this information already existed. This was the sister. Yes, I hope it will all come out what D heard. D supposedly called all the girls in the house after crying and screaming stopped and no one answered. And she still didn't call the police. That's exactly right. None of this makes sense at all. 911 caller was the friend who went in because D called him to come over because she was scared from what she heard in the night. Everything else is adding up. Went to Ethan and Zaina's room first. So she heard one of the housemates say, there's someone here. And then she heard the suspect say, it's okay, I'm here to help, as he wandered through the house committing the atrocity. This is her words. Some argued that Mortensen didn't call 911 right away because she might have been frozen by fear. But remember, she just thought he was a party goer. Why would she have been frozen by fear? She was calling everybody else and shit. Gonzalez and Mogan was killed first, and after Chapin and Cornado were killed on the second floor of the house. Chapin was murdered in the doorway of Cornado's room. Cornado apparently attempted to fight the killer, repeatedly grabbing a knife from the suspect Kohlberger. She had deep cuts on her fingers. Chapin apparently was slashed in the neck. Imagine how much blood it would have to be. And in a situation where these people fought like this, imagine how much blood there would actually have to be. I'm curious about that. Let's see what old Banfield says.
A lot of things, not everything. But the probable cause affidavit, some of the police reporting, and the news conferences, that's given us a small picture. But what we haven't known is what happened prior to the first responders arriving on the scene. And tonight I can tell you. You have heard that the 911 call was made from a surviving roommate's cell phone. But we can now tell you who it was who made that call. I'm not going to name the person, but it was Ethan's best friend who made the 911 call. And that's because it was Ethan's best friend who made the discovery of Xana and Ethan's bodies.
How? That's what I want to know is how.
And that is a very tragic and sad detail to report. Up until now, it had been an assumption that there was maybe an unconscious person because it was a guess, that there was someone behind the door who wasn't answering a bedroom door. Now we can tell you that it was Ethan's best friend who had been called over that morning and made the discovery and took Ethan's pulse. Had
been called over that morning. That means, all right, if her reporting is accurate, Ethan's best friend was called over that morning. That would have to probably be by Dylan Mortensen. Let's continue.
Also called out to get 911 on the phone.
I just want you guys to understand what they're trying to demand that we believe. They're trying to demand that we believe that all of this happened the night before. She saw Kohlberger was frozen in fear for 8 hours, then she snapped out of it and called other people, didn't see all the blood, didn't think about this. You're telling me that under Ethan's body, because she would have had to have seen the body or she wouldn't have called to her friends or whatever, 8 hours later. You're telling me this brutal stabbing. Listen, man, you ever cut your hand and seen how much blood, like you ever just punch something and your hand is bleeding and see how much fucking blood there is? Imagine getting your throat slit or a big fight where they're grabbing the knife and shit. Come on, man. You're telling me that they didn't know that to the point where they're taking pulses and shit? Come on.
It is more than likely that the phone that was used to call 911 was surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen's cell phone. You have probably heard up until now that it was an unconscious person that the dispatch said over the radio. But that's not unusual, because when there's confusion, it's standard protocol, according to an article that came out recently in Airmail. Standard protocol, if there's confusion, just to skip the...
I don't understand how there could have been confusion. Somebody had their fucking neck slit, their throat cut. Motherfuckers checked his pulse. What confusion could there have been in a puddle of blood?
The necessities of getting clarity, and just dispatch the first responders for an unconscious person, regardless of what the actual situation is. So for anyone getting caught up on an unconscious person, probably not a good idea, given the fact that that's just sort of a standard description for get moving. We need people on the location. Again, this is multiple sources tonight with knowledge of the investigation.
Multiple sources
telling us about who made the discovery of Ethan's body, and then, of course, of Xana's body. Right?
Ain't it crazy how all these leaks are happening right in the middle of a fucking gag order? Isn't that nuts? But yet they want Steve to shut the fuck up. They want Steve Gonsalves to shut the fuck up. Ain't it crazy how all of these leaks just come out, and they keep coming out? News Nation has a new leak every day.
Can't tell you is who made the discovery of Maddie and Kaylee on the 3rd floor. I'm not sure if it was any of the other kids who were called over. What is, interesting about this whole scenario that played out that morning was that kids came over to the home, and then 911 was called.
Yeah.
So who knows if there was any knowledge of the carnage that had taken place in that home before the kids came over. I mean, it's college, right? It's Sunday morning after a fun Saturday night.
Well, no, considering there was reports that she had actually made that call at 10 a.m. Let that sink in. And you know what? Something tells me we're going to eventually learn that those initial reports, those reports we got weeks ago, that Dylan called the friends over at 10 a.m., something tells me we're going to find out that shit was true. I'm just saying, there's something is not, I understand there's a lot of you guys that want to look at Dylan as a victim and this and that, but come on, man. How much more shit do we need to not add up?
And maybe, just maybe, kids were coming over to, get together and go out for a Sunday brunch.
Right.
But some kids who are unidentified at this time went over to the house that morning, and it was Ethan's best friend who made that discovery and took Ethan's pulse and yelled for them to call 911, and ultimately got on the phone on Dylan Mortensen's phone and talked to the 911 operators. I want to bring in News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton. Brian has been at the forefront of reporting this story. It's such an uncomfortable detail, but it is one piece of the puzzle that we've been trying to figure out in terms of why it's so complicated, that scene the morning of the murders.
Yeah, so much of this has been confusing based on the reports we've gotten from police. There have been so many holes and things that they haven't shared. I think beginning with your exclusive reporting last week, things started to make a little bit more sense in terms of surviving roommate Dylan, and the fact that she may have thought that there were noises coming from upstairs, but not necessarily noises that meant that something bad was happening or that a murder was happening. That started.
Then why would the bitch be froze for 8 hours?
To explain why she may have not initially called 911, in the middle of the night. Your exclusive reporting sort of shed light on that, and now I think this sort of continues to again, put the pieces together. Now to know that there were people who came to the house that morning, and it would make sense what you said about the unconscious person. That may have just been a categorization that the 911 call was put under, but certainly tragic, as you said, to think that Ethan's best friend, took the pulse.
No, we specifically had been told, we can go back and look, that one of the friends passed out in the grass outside, and the other one was hyperventilating. You remember those stories? Pepperidge Farms remembers.
I mean, it's all just so heartbreaking.
Thank you for watching.
This shit is bizarre. This shit is bizarre. And it gets crazier. It gets crazier and crazier. You know what? In fact, by the way, it gets crazy because we can go back and touch on the gag order a little bit. Attorney on Idaho gag order. More information is better than less. And I agree. However, it depends, because if we're going to muddy the waters where the jury, where Brian Kohlberger can't get a fair trial, then, see, I'm kind of on the fence here. I'm a freedom of speech absolutist, but I'm also going to be honest with you. I want Kohlberger to get a fair trial.
To get your thoughts on this, that this was Ethan's best friend who actually made the discovery of the bodies. It wasn't first responders who discovered the bodies. Up until now, we'd always assumed that perhaps they were behind locked doors, and that's why the roommates had called, "We can't wake our friends up." But it was Ethan's best friend. Not only that, took the pulse, called out to call 911, and ended up talking to 911 on Dylan Mortensen's cell phone. Does that matter? There's so many details that are being held close to the vest, Mark. And I just want to
I'm still not understanding the pulse checking.
Find out if it really matters to the investigation. Does it matter to the rights of the defendant in this case, these kinds of details that are all being gagged?
You know, I've always had, Ashley, and you and I have been around together doing various cases for many years, ones that I've tried and ones that you've covered. And one of my frustrations in defending these cases is when you clamp down on the coverage, and you do it by way of a gag order. And you'll remember many years ago that started during Michael Jackson and Scott Peterson and then Kobe Bryant and it was basically the same gag order that was kind of circulated, even though it was in different jurisdictions. And the frustration is that gag orders were originally, when F. Lee Bailey did his case many years ago.
Here's what's crazy about this gag order, right? Is wouldn't the news, like, wouldn't Ashley Banfield, like, all right, if it's a violation, if it's contempt of court to violate the gag order, wouldn't that make, like, I don't know how this works, like the gag order shit, because I've never seen it, not in real life aspect. Wouldn't this be like accessory to that thing, right? Like if Ashley Banfield is being fed illegal information from someone going against a court order, and she's thus reporting said private gagged information, like, well, like, wouldn't that mean something?
That put him on the map, and it was to protect the defense. Now what it does, I think, in my humble opinion, is that it works to the detriment of the defense. And what ends up happening is you might be able to gag the lawyers, they're under a duty, but law enforcement leaks. Other people leak that are connected, that may have documents. I mean, the DeLorean case, I remember the paralegal leaked for the defense. And so what ends up happening is you get all of these kinds of urban legends that kind of flow to the case and to the populace. Yeah. And there's no way to disabuse people of that.
Right. And here's the thing, is because of that, potential jurors are going to hear that madness. They're going to hear that shit, which, as I said, it will muddy the waters. So I don't know, because think about how confused you and me are. Think about all the different stories that came out during this case. Even just now, the leaks in the last week, we've covered them on this channel extensively. Just the leaks itself. Know how confusing that is. Now imagine you're a juror on that fucking team and you don't know shit. Shut up, dog.
When you do jury selection, they just don't, they think they understand things, and it's very hard for people to disabuse themselves or set it aside. I always think in these kinds of cases, more information is better than less.
You know, and I just want to touch on that because there is a healthy debate among people who are looking at this case. The First Amendment versus the Sixth Amendment, the right to a speedy trial and a fair trial, an impartial jury. But we also have a transparent system of jurisprudence in America, and that is very important. You know, that's something that not a lot of people talk about as well. And I wonder, from your perspective, because you've covered these famous infamous, I should say, defendants, if you can get a jury for OJ, if you can get a jury for Casey, if you can get a jury for John Wayne Gacy, even, going back a bit here, but do you know what I'm saying? If you can get a jury for those people, is there a danger of protecting a jury pool too much to the detriment of our system in America, where we just don't put people in black hoods and throw them in a gulag?
So I've had this argument for decades, and part of what the argument that I've made in response is we have reached a point where we have supersized cases. Idaho is a supersized case.
It is.
So if you're going to import kind of a tabloid model, and I don't say that in a pejorative sense, I say it what originally kind of developed in England, then why don't we have what's called the Contempt of Court Act, which they have in England, which is as soon as this trial starts, they clamp down. Now, you say, well, that's not part of the American way. Well, then there is another alternative. The other alternative is, well, once you start the trial, sequester the jury. And why I say that is, if you believe the jurors when they tell you they're going to set aside everything,
but you can't believe
which is
that.
Great. I want jurors who
you can't
have
believe
a
that,
presumption of guilt many times because they're being honest with me and they'll set it aside. But if they're going to do that, then I want to be able and I want to be free outside the presence of the jury to argue that evidence should not come in. You take a look at the Murdaugh case. There was so much testimony for the motions in limine outside the presence that seeps into the ether. Jurors are going home each night. I've never got a high degree of confidence that they don't hear
exactly
what was presumably excluded. So
sure.
If they're sequestered, I think that's the magic silver bullet.
It's something that can help.
Mark Argos, always.
I don't know if it's the magic silver bullet or not, guys. I don't. And everybody's freaking out about this Ann Taylor thing, right? I don't know if you guys are aware of the Ann Taylor situation. Well, Ann Taylor, who everybody is trying to get removed as his lawyer because they're mad because she doesn't want to represent the dope fiend and the other dope fiends, that she decided she wants the high-profile case. Let me explain to you, this is the reason why. Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger's lawyer will triple her income with $200 an hour agreement to defend him on the taxpayer's dime, despite multiple conflicts of interest with the students' families. I'm just going to say this, man. It's a career move. It's a good career move. And if she gets Bryan Kohberger off, and listen, she made her choice based on her own career. We need lawyers that are willing to defend the public. And you yourself, you may believe that Bryan Kohberger is 100% guilty and you don't want him to have a good lawyer. But listen, man, she's here to make a name for herself. Kohberger is set to appear in court on June 26 to enter a plea. The 28-year-old is accused of killing the 4 students, and Taylor will be paid $416,000 a year based on her income for the case. And a lot of people are really, really mad about that. Now, I'm actually smiling because that means she makes more than Joe Biden. I'm good with that. Because Joe Biden shouldn't make shit. But anyway, she makes more than Joe Biden, way less than Anthony Fauci, but that's a different story. A lawyer defending suspected quadruple killer Bryan Kohberger will be paid $200 an hour in the case, with any additional overtime. Chief Public Defender Ann Taylor, who is the best for this job, will be paid by the county for her 40-hour work week, with Latah County agreeing to give the funds to Kuntai for her work. But any overtime that she accrues outside of these hours will be paid by Latah County directly to the attorney, with a second lawyer supporting Taylor in the case to be paid $180 per hour. Taylor's representing the 28-year-old criminal justice. Look, after stepping down from Carrie Northington, the mother of Xana Coronado. She was in charge of her case until January 5th, the day that she pulled out to represent Kohberger when he was extradited from Pennsylvania. The lawyer is also accused of a second conflict of interest in the case after it was revealed that she represented Maddie Mogan's stepmother, Corey Hattrick, in June 2022 and oversaw a case involving her father, Benjamin, in 2020. A whole bunch of dope fiends is going on right now. Kohlberger is accused of murdering Mogan in Coronado, which we all know. Experts previously told the Daily Mail they would be surprised if there was no one else that could represent Kohlberger in the case, despite the small pool of lawyers in Idaho. And that's what it all boils down to. They're going to make this a death penalty case. And if she's one of the only people that can do it, listen, conflict of interest depends on how you look at it. In 2021, Taylor earned $118,866, but based on the $200 an hour pay to represent Kohlberger, she would get $416,000 a year. Presentation of evidence in this case has been predicted to last 5 days in June, with an average of 8 hours in court, meaning that Taylor and her team could earn more than $3,000 per day. In total, they would get $15,200 per week without overtime, as well as being reimbursed for mileage, lodging, and meal costs. Any investigators working on her behalf will be compensated at a rate of $45 per hour, according to the agreement which was approved on Tuesday. According to the American Bar Association, the average hourly pay for capital punishment attorneys in 2007 was $100, which equates to around $141 in 2023, with inflation meaning Taylor is being paid above average for the case. And to me, that makes sense. This is a big, major case. Taylor, in case you guys didn't know, she's one of the just 13 public defenders in Idaho approved by the state's Public Defense Commission to lead capital punishment cases. And the only one in all of North Idaho. She's it. It's it. It's it. Latah County does not have a public defender who is qualified to represent suspects in capital cases, but they wanted to ensure they had a team of attorneys who could represent in death penalty cases. It would indicate that the prosecutors are leaning towards pursuing the death penalty with the payment for that kind of representation discussed in the agreements. That's what it all boils down to. The prosecutors are going to go for the death penalty, and Ann Taylor is one of the only people, especially in North Idaho, who has the ability to defend someone in this type of situation. Now, they've talked about the parents. Listen, this isn't like a big city, man. These types of situations are more likely to occur. Public defenders they're gonna look, man. How many public defenders do you think there are in that entire region? And ultimately, unluckily for Coronato's mom and shit like that, at the end of the day, if she's the only one that can do it, I don't see what the problem is. I don't see where Coronato's mom isn't going to be a witness. Was a witness of what? There was no, unless there was some dope being sold. I don't understand why the two former clients, the dope fiends, would even be considered in this trial. They weren't there. They have no part in any of this at all.
Coffendorfer, a friend of mine, former FBI agent who's been following this case very, very closely. All right, Jennifer, let's start with this new development today of what the public defender is getting paid. I saw you just tweeted about it. What do you make of it?
I was very surprised, and let me tell you why. She's a government county employee. I can tell you that the law enforcement officers that were investigating that case, those 60 FBI agents, the state detectives, their salaries did not get doubled because they were working a quadruple homicide.
They got different strokes for different votes.
In a short period of time that I've known about this.
The hours that it takes to go into what you got to understand. I understand what you're saying about the investigation team, but here's the reality. You have to find someone willing to defend Kohlberger. There's no way around it. You have to find someone willing to defend Kohlberger. And the reality of this is they may ask for a little bit more. Because ultimately, think about where this puts Ann Taylor. Everybody on the internet's talking about Ann Taylor. There could be threats to her, to her family, to her dog, to her kids, whatever the case may be. Because there's so many fucking unstable people on the internet. I do believe that Ann Taylor should be paid more to defend Brian Kohlberger. That way, it guarantees him for the most part. I see you copping, Doc. Yeah, I kind of like it. Anyway, let me get back to this. Anyways, the reality of this situation is this is a big case. And you have to convince people to put their reputation on the line and defend Brian Kohlberger. She deserves, look, man, Kohlberger deserves a fair trial with good representation. I don't understand how anyone cannot think that. Get a Chapin doctor. Chapin doctor be sucking some dick. You can take a look at your boy and go.
I've never known of something like this to happen with a public defender, to have their salary increase. Her previous salary was noted as 119 to 172,000, probably dependent on overtime figured into that. And now she could be making about 384,000, and that is without overtime. And her co-counsel making 180 an hour for 40 hours.
What's the problem?
So this is big, Brian. It's a lot of money, and I don't understand how they can do it.
Well, because the alternative is that listen, if you don't let Brian Kohlberger get good representation, he wins on appeal. It's that simple. You got to provide Brian Kohlberger with good representation or he will win on appeal. It's not that hard. This is actually a smart move by Idaho. This is a smart move by the state of Idaho. Because you want to minimize, if you really believe Brian Kohlberger did this, you want to minimize any potential appeals that could come as a result of him not receiving quality representation.
Yeah, you make a good point. I hadn't thought about that. The detectives don't get paid more money or anything like that. But I will say we have to remember this is a death penalty case. It takes a lot of expertise.
It does.
It's a difficult case. I called a few friends of mine who were in the field before this, right when we found out. They weren't terribly surprised. They said they would have thought the number may have been closer to $100 an hour. But certainly when you add it all up and $384,000 a year, I think that came as a surprise to a lot of us. Okay, let's move on. Ashley Banfield has had a lot of
she's gonna get fucking rich from this
over the last week or so. Last night, really a big development with what she reported about the 911 call. She says that according to her sources, it was Ethan's best friend who made the call from Dylan's phone. You'll remember that was the morning after the murders. We didn't know who made the phone call. Now, according to the sources, it was Ethan's best friend. Why do you think that's important, and how do you think that sort of fits into what we already knew, Jennifer?
Well, of course, this was information that was kind of dribbling through social media very early on.
Yes,
and
it
now
was.
We have a source also reporting it. It's going to be important, Brian.
I think it's interesting, right? How a lot of the things we were told earlier that people were like, nah, man, you got to wait for them to officially say that, JB. Now it's being said. And ain't that crazy how that worked? Ain't that crazy? No, JB, you got to wait for the authorities to say it. Suck my authority, weirdos.
To know who all was there. Law enforcement obviously already does know. But all these details are going to become very important to the timeline and to also who was in that crime scene right after those murders were.
Think about how disturbed the crime scene has to be. Think about that. If you were to want to plant a knife sheath and frame someone, seems like a perfect time to do it. That's all I'm saying.
Committed and before law enforcement was there.
Yeah, and we've got the gag order now.
At least as the defense, I would do it. I would say that.
But it also sort of makes sense why so many of these people involved weren't talking even before the gag order. We didn't realize at the time, but a lot of them apparently are witnesses in the case.
Absolutely. They're witnesses, and they're important witnesses. And it's important that they're not out in the public talking. It can really taint their testimony later on.
It already is.
Even make
the fact that there's leaking going on is already tainting the testimony.
Statement that doesn't seem to go with another statement. That's a defense counsel's dream and a prosecution's nightmare.
Yep.
So when we had the affidavit, Jennifer, there was the line about Dylan being frozen in fear.
Exactly.
That, when all of this was happening, she saw a man walk by in a mask and was frozen in fear. And there was a lot of confusion about what took so long to make the 911 call. But when you piece together some of Ashley's reporting, her reporting is now indicating that Dylan didn't necessarily know that something bad was going on upstairs. That there were just noises, that, it was a party house. It may have been something else going on, and perhaps that's why she didn't initially call, and then now we know that it was Ethan's best friend who used her phone to make the call and made the discovery.
I can't wait to hear her response.
All of those new tidbits fit into the timeline. Does it make sense to you?
No.
Well, the bedrock of this case in terms of what we have in the public as far as facts is that probable cause affidavit. That's the cornerstone of the case as we know it.
Right. So you're sticking to that. She was frozen in fear.
Now, factually, if you look at that, there were 3 different times she opened that door. And so these statements that are being made by the source certainly make sense with her first time she opened the door, where she talks about hearing possibly Kaylee playing with Murphy. And possibly there could be more that was stated. Remember, Brian, in these interviews and the interview of Dylan Mortensen, it is going to be pages long, possibly hours long of recorded interview time. So the PPA just has a small snippet of what was said. So I think both statements can be true, but the bottom line is I do believe she was frozen. She was terrified when she saw that figure in her
frozen. But this is Coffin-Dopper, you're an idiot. You're a fucking idiot. She said she thought it was one of the party goers, dummy.
Yeah, it's a good point. That
it's
she
not.
Opened the door several different times and may have had a different reaction each time. Jennifer, thanks so much for coming on tonight. It's always good to see you.
Specifically, it was said that she thought Kohberger was one of the party goers. Stop it. Guys, let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you think Ann Taylor is making too much money? Are you mad because Ann Taylor is getting paid to do her job? Are you one of the people that, like me, wonder why someone would take the pulse of someone with the throat slit? Curious what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section exactly what you think when it comes to this. I went ahead and smushed these. I could have made 2 videos out of this, but I decided to just give you the long ride. You know what I'm saying. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about all this. Guys, if you like what I do here and you find my content valuable, no better time than now. Join the Gun Squad. Support the channel. Show me you got love for this shit. I do this every day for y'all. I have had a couple of days where I've been sick, but it is what it is. Guys, check out my other channels if you would like. I love you guys, and I will see you in your next video. Your next segment on this channel will probably be tomorrow at 1 p.m. I may decide to go live. You guys have been saying that you guys would call in. Do you guys want me to do a call-in show? If you do, I can set it up. Love you guys. I'm going to get up out of here. Be cool. Have a good day. Peace out.